Welcome to GDs, and this is Alex Rider, Season 1. Season starts with a US businessman, Michael Roscoe, planning to meet with Alan Blunt, the Director of Special Operations, a division of MI6 in London, as Michael is troubled by his son Parker since he came back from the school for troubled teenagers, point blank. But before he could make it, he is assassinated by a hitman, Yasin, with the help of technology. In London, we get to meet Alex Rider, a smart and an athletic kid who is being grounded by his uncle Ian as he broke into the school to get the phone of his friend Tom. Alex, after losing both his parents, is living under the guardianship of his uncle Ian and is being taken care by their housekeeper Jack, who has now become the part of the family. Ian has a cover story of working in a bank, but in reality, he is a field agent for Special Operations Group. At the dinner table, when Alex pointed out that the son of the businessman who died went to a special school for troubled teenagers, Ian was able to connect the dots with an assassination of another businessman whose son also went to the same school. And Ian, in order to get more information, goes to meet a potential source with his partner Martin. But it turns out it was all a setup and his partner betrayed him. Ian is assassinated by Yasin, and in order to make it feel like an ambush, Martin is also shot in the arm. Alex is informed that his uncle died in a car crash as he was speeding. But he does not believe the story, as he knows that his uncle was a stickler for rules. And with his friend's phone still in the car's dashboard, he was able to locate it using Find My Phone, from where he followed the special agent Crawley to the base of operations. Alan Blunt, impressed with Alex's ability and having a need for a teenager in order to investigate their only lead, tells Alex the whole truth, that his uncle was indeed a special agent working for them, and he wants Alex's help in order to figure out why he was assassinated. But Alex, angered how his uncle died and the following cover-up, refuses to help them for the moment. And even before he could make his mind to join, Alex is forced to accept the offer as his housekeeper Jack is threatened of being deported, as well as himself of being sent to foster home. The group informs Alex about their suspicion of the school point blank, as it is associated by death of two businessmen and both died soon after their sons returned from point blank, and they think his uncle Ian was able to make a connection, and it is because of which he was eliminated. The group, not having any information about the school, want Alex to attend the school and report back his findings. As Alex waits, he is approached by Jeffrey Daniels in school, claiming to be from the Office of Foreign and Commonwealth. He informs Alex that he wants to take down Alan Blunt and to shut his department, as he thinks he works unethically and illegally, and for this he wants his help. Alex refuses to answer any question, and Daniels warns him to watch his back. And on his way back, Alex is abducted by a group led by Wolf, who interrogates him and asks him what he knows about point blank. But Alex, not only being able to resist the interrogation, but was also able to break out from there. Meanwhile, Jack, worried about Alex, breaks into his laptop and was able to figure out what he has been up to, and she calls Mrs. Jones. And she is also surprised knowing that Alex is not home. And it turns out that both Wolf as well as Daniels, aka Smithers, were both the part of special operations, and they were just testing Alex. And they were quite impressed by Alex's abilities, as he was able to resist the interrogation, and they believe that Ian trained him well, though for Alex it was not a training. After passing the test, Blunt appoints Mrs. Jones to be Alex's handler. The group has arranged a meeting for Alex to be accepted in point blank, and have given him a story of being a troubled teenager and a son to the rich billionaire David Friend, who already has a troubled daughter, and Alex has to go to live with them for his interview and for appearances in order to get admission into point blank. But before doing so, he has to change his look, and Jack helps him with that, while the agency provides him with an encrypted music player for communication. On the other hand, Martin assures Yasin that Ian's death is not being looked into, as the agency believes that it was a payback from North Korea and their cover story has worked. Alex finally goes to Friend's estate for his interview. Tom, not understanding the sudden changes in Alex, goes to meet him by getting his location from Jack, and it is when Alex tells Tom the whole truth. Point Blank's Dean, Eva, finally reaches the estate, and they were able to convince her to take Alex in the academy, despite their daughter Fiona trying to blow his cover and thus had to be sedated. And Alex finally reaches Point Blank in the French Alps. On reaching the academy, Alex's phone is confiscated, but he is allowed to keep his MP3 player. At the academy, Alex becomes friends with other batchmates, James, Kyra, and Laura, but finds other two students, Sasha and Arsh, were quite different from the rest of them. He also figures out that all the students are successors of big global companies belonging to shipping, banking, telecom, internet, weapons, among others. In addition, the second floor as well as the basement is closed for them, and Alex has this weird feeling of being watched. Alex also gets to meet Dr. Grief, who is the head of the academy. In addition, he is slapped by Eva for misbehaving with Dr. Grief, and Alex is not able to report back at the agency because his MP3 player does not have any connectivity. The next day, Laura, feeling sick in class, is sent to the infirmary, while Alex is knocked unconscious and is being taken for some kind of medical procedure. Back in London, Martin, not being able to access Ian's file, gets suspicious, while Mrs. Jones, talking with Jack, was able to figure out that Martin is compromised, and they start to keep an eye on him. Martin, in order to know more, visits Ian's house, and Jack slips up about Alex before she could be warned by Mrs. Jones, and Martin leaves the house with the photo of Alex and Tom. And before the agency could catch him, he is taken out by Yasin to cover his tracks, and he recovers a photo of Alex and Tom from him. Back in the academy, Alex wakes up and finds himself in his room. Alex shares his experience with others, thinking it to be a weird dream, but is surprised to find that all of them have had similar experiences. While Laura returns to the group only to have completely changed and sits with Arsh and Sasha instead of them, and this makes James angry, confused, and afraid. James tells Alex and Kyra that they need to get out of there before they turn like Laura, and for doing so, they first break into Dr. Grief's office, and Kyra hacks all the keypads, adding an extra password. Meanwhile, Yasin, investigating the photo, was able to find Tom as well as Alex, but not his real identity and that of Alex's friend. The agency tries to contact a number in Martin's phone, but on receiving the call, they realize that it was a security breach, and they disconnect the call, and Yasin is sent to Dr. Grief to provide new safety protocols. Yasin also informs Dr. Grief about the photo he recovered. In addition, he also has a brief encounter with Alex. After he leaves, James tries to escape from the compound while Alex and Kyra create a distraction, but he is caught by Eva, who takes him to her office. Alex, on seeing this, also follows them to her office, only to find that they have disappeared. Alex and Kyra decide to investigate the same, and they were able to keep the doors unlocked in the night and go to Eva's office to look, where they were able to find a secret door leading to the second floor. And on the second floor, they find rooms matching their exact room and cameras used to record their activities as if they are being studied. And Alex finds a mask assuring him of his initial feeling of being watched. And as they were about to leave, they witness Dr. Grief and Eva congratulating Dr. Baxter on doing his finest work as they eliminate him. And Dr. Grief reveals to Eva that he intends to deal with Kyra the next day. Meanwhile in London, Michael's son Parker Roscoe takes control of his father's company, and Alan visits him, and feeling suspicious about his attitude, he orders his agents to keep an eye on Parker. Back in the academy, James has now returned, being completely changed just like Laura. Kyra, knowing that she is next, tells Alex that they need to escape now, but Alex still needs to find answers for his uncle's death, and knowing that they are not on the second floor, knows that they must be in the basement, and he wants Kyra to wait. But Kyra decides to leave the compound without him. As Kyra leaves, Alex goes down in the basement to investigate and finds that Dr. Grief had made his clones, and now using plastic surgery, he has turned each of those clones into a replica of all the students. Whereas all the original students of Point Blank have been imprisoned and are being used to gain information so that the clones could replace them in their real life. Meanwhile, Dr. Grief, in order to know the truth about the photo, asks Parker to look into Tom. Parker invites Tom to his office, where he was able to get access to Tom's phone, and they were able to find the true identity of Alex. And Parker passes this information to Dr. Grief. But before he could eliminate Tom, Jack, getting to know that he was missing from school, sends in help and he is safe. Back at the academy, Alex is captured by Dr. Grief, who reveals his plans to reshape the global order using his clones to control key industries. He interrogates Alex to know who he has been working for, but Alex is able to fight it. In return, he also learned from Dr. Grief that he never ordered the execution of his uncle, and he even denies knowing him. Alex was able to get free with the help of Kyra, and he breaks out of the academy using an improvised snowboard in order to contact home so that he can get help. And Alex promises Kyra that he will be back for her. Alex was able to escape from the guards, but as he reaches down the mountain, he is hit by a truck and knocked out. In London, Mrs. Jones, getting to know that Alex's cover has blown, orders Wolf to get in France to rescue him. Back in France, the truck driver who hit Alex calls for an ambulance and he is taken to the hospital. Dr. Grief, getting to know this information, sends in Eva to make sure that Alex is dead. And when Eva reaches the hospital, she sees Alex flatlining in front of her and thus confirms to Dr. Grief that Alex is no more. But indeed, it was all a ruse just to fool her. Alex was able to convince Mrs. Jones and Wolf to allow him to join them in the rescue mission of students from Point Blank. And in order to ease security at the academy, they use voice print of Parker to convince Dr. Grief that Tom has been eliminated and everything is good. Alex, along with Wolf and others, attacks the academy and they are able to capture Dr. Grief as well as all his clones, while Eva is killed in a lab explosion. They are also able to rescue all of the original students. Alex returns home. However, back at an empty Point Blank, Alex's clone emerges, and seeking revenge on Alex, he travels to London. On the other hand, Kyra learns that her parents are dead, as Dr. Grief ordered it before being captured, and she escapes from the safe house as she visits Alex's school, where they talk about Point Blank before parting ways. Back at the agency, Dr. Grief informs them that he had nothing to do with Ian's execution, and they now know that it was the group which he hired to assassinate the businessman had something to do with Ian's death, and they are afraid, not knowing who is behind the group. And as Dr. Grief is being transferred for enhanced interrogation, he is executed by Yasin on the way. While Mrs. Jones, talking with Alex to know more, finds out that he remembered a face, and as she shows him photographs, Alex identifies Yasin from a young photo of him along with a photo of a blurred man. And Mrs. Jones informs him that it's Yasin and they presumed him to be dead, while refusing to provide the identity of the other man, saying it's classified. Mrs. Jones informs the agency about the same, and they now know that the organization behind Ian's assassination is Scorpia, a gun for hire which they thought was dismantled years back. In addition, they now believe that Yasin might have identified Alex, citing his close resemblance with his father, and why Ian might have been killed as he was still searching for them. In addition, they realize that Alex's clone is missing, but by this time he was already at Alex's prom and hurting Tom in order to inflict pain on Alex. But Alex was able to reach in time to save Tom. As Alex and his clone fight out in the school compound, Mrs. Jones reaches there and Tom knocks out the imposter. As he is taken into the custody, he breaks free, but before he could shoot Alex, Yasin takes him out. As the season ends, we see Alex returning to his normal life with Tom and Jack, while Blunt and Mrs. Jones contemplating whether to tell Alex the truth about Yasin or not.
Thanks for watching, and if you liked it, please subscribe.